Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jacinta. It is your first time here. Thank you for stopping by. So in this video I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to cut and sew this Ankara dress with rolled collar. If it's what you love to learn, kindly watch till the end. And if you're yet to subscribe, please hit on the subscribe button below and also turn on your notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. So without wasting much time, let's get started with this tutorial. These are the fabrics I'll be making use of. I have 6 yards of Ankara here, but I'll be making use of 2.5 yards. I also have my lining and I'll be making use of 1.5 yards. Then this plain fabric for the collar, I have 1 yard here. Starting off with the pattern drafting, from the tip of my pattern paper, I will mark 1 inch downwards and square across, and I will label that my shoulder line. Placing my tape on the shoulder line, I'll mark 10.5 inches downwards for my bust point, 14 inches for the under bust, and 17 inches for the half length. I'll square across and label these lines. Placing my tape on the half length, I will mark 9 inches downwards for the hip line and 22 inches downwards for the full length from the waist. I will add extra 3.5 inches to the full length because I want the main fabric to be part of the lining. I'll square across these lines. Then on the shoulder, I'm going to mark off of my shoulder measurements, and I'm going to mark 3.5 inches for the neck width and 1.5 inches for the shoulder slope. I will connect the shoulder slants, then mark 3 inches downwards for my neck depth and connect with a curve. From the shoulder slope, I will mark 7 inches downwards for my armhole level and connect with a straight line. On the points where the armhole level ended, I will extend the line and that becomes my chest line. I will mark the midpoint of this straight line. On that midpoint, I will come in by ½ inch. Then on the chest line, I will mark out of my bust circumference and use my curved ruler to connect from the shoulder slope to the ½ inch I came in by to quarter of my bust circumference on the chest line to form my armhole curve. Now for the dart, I will mark off of my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 3.5 inches on the bust line, under bust and the half length, and also on the hip line, and connect with a straight line. On that straight line, I'll mark 6 inches downwards from the half length. On the half length also, I will mark ½ inch on both sides of the straight line and connect it upwards to the bust line and downwards to that 6 inches. I'm going to tighten my under bust. To do this, I will mark ½ inch on both sides of the dart leg on the under bust line and connect it upwards to the bust point and downwards to the half length like so. I'll find the midpoint of my shoulder slant and connect it with a slight curve to the bust point. Now I'm going to impute quarter of my round body measurement. On the bust line, I'm going to mark quarter of my bust circumference, and I'll add extra 2 inches for sewing allowance. I'll also add 2 inches on the chest line. At the under bust, I'll mark quarter of my under bust circumference and replace with that, and I'll also add 2 inches for my sewing allowance. On the half length, I'll mark quarter of my waist circumference, replace with that, and add 2 inches sewing allowance. I'm going to do a hip allocation on the hip. So on this front hip, I'm going to divide my hip circumference by 2 and minus 1 inch. Okay, I'm going to minus 1 inch from half of my hip circumference. When I minus the 1 inch, then I'm going to divide my answer by 2. Okay, whatever I get is what I'm going to mark on this hip line. Then add my 2 inches sewing allowance. On the full length, I will minus 4 inches from my hip circumference and divide by 4. Mark whatever I gave me there, and I'm going to add extra 2 inches for sewing allowance. I'll do the same for the allowance line. After marking, I'm going to connect this point with my ruler. Now for my back pattern, I'll mark 1 inch downwards from the tip of my pattern paper, square across and label that shoulder line. At the center back, I'll come in by 1 inch for my zip allowance and connect down to the full length. Placing my tape on the shoulder line, I will mark 10.5 inches downwards my bust line and 15 inches for the back half length. I'll square across and label the lines. On the shoulder line, I will mark off of my shoulder measurement, which is 8.5 inches, and I'm going to come downwards by 1.5 inches for my shoulder slope. Then mark 3.5 inches for my neck width and connect the neck width to the shoulder slope. Then I'm going to mark 7 inches downwards from the 1.5 inches I came down by for my armhole level. At the point where it ended, I'm going to extend it just like what we did from the front and that becomes my chest line. I'll mark the midpoint of the straight line and come in by 1/2 inch. On the chest line, I'll mark quarter of my bust circumference, then use my armhole curve to connect from the shoulder slope to the 1/2 inch I came in by to quarter of my bust circumference to form my armhole curve. From the half length, I will mark 9 inches downwards for my hip line and 22 inches for the full length from the waist, and I'll also add my allowance of 3.5 inches. I'll swear across and label these lines. Now for my darts, I will mark half of my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 3.5 inches on the bust line, half length, and on the hip line, and connect with a straight line. From the half length, I'll mark 6 inches upwards on that straight line, and I'll also mark 6 inches downwards. Then I'll mark 1/2 inch on both sides of the dart line at the half length and connect it upwards to that 6 inches and also downwards. I'll mark the midpoint of the shoulder slant and connect it to the dart line like so. I'll mark 8.5 inches downwards from the shoulder for my back neck depth and connect it to the neck width. On the chest line, I'll add 2 inches sewing allowance. On the bust line, I'll mark quarter of my bust circumference and add 2 inches sewing allowance. On the half length, I will mark quarter of my waist circumference, replace the 1 inch dart and add my 2 inches sewing allowance. Then on the hip line, I'm going to divide my hip circumference by 2 and add 1 inch. The 1 inch we minus at the front hip is what we are going to add to this back hip. So half of my hip circumference plus 1 inch divided by 2 is what I'm going to mark on this hip line. When I'm inputting the measurements on my hip line, I'm going to start from the side back so that the two sides of the front and back will be equal. The width of this pattern paper could not contain all that, so I had to add extra pattern paper. At the full length, I minused 4 inches from my hip circumference divided by 4 and mark, and I added extra 2 inches sewing allowance. I'm marking the same measurement on the allowance. So after marking these points, I'm going to connect. So guys, I made a mistake while connecting the center back. I was supposed to include the zip allowance on the half length, but I didn't. Okay, so we have marked out the zip allowance. So while connecting, you're going to start from the zip allowance on the half length, and also on the full length I'm also going to mark to that zip allowance. I corrected this while cutting this out, so please do not make the same mistake. I'm going to include the zip allowance. This one is zip allowance on the half length. That's where I'm going to connect from, and I'm going to end on the zip allowance at the full length. I'm also going to come in by 1/2 inch at the half length to avoid zipper bulge. I'll connect it upwards to the shoulder line and blend it downwards to the hip line. I'm going to replace this 1/2 inch while cutting on my fabric. I forget to do that on the pattern. Okay, I'm placing this 1/2 inch because this is an Ankara fabric I'm working with. It is not stretchy. If you're working with a stretchy fabric, you can there will be no need to replace the 1/2 inch on the side, but because this is an Ankara fabric and it is not stretchy, you're going to replace this 1/2 inch. After connecting, I'll go ahead and cut this out. This is the front pattern. I marked 2 inches downwards from the bust line for the side bust start, and I connected it to the bust point. I'm going to close this side bust dart, then cut the half length. I'm going to remove the front skirt dart by coming in by 1 inch on the half length from the side front and connecting it to the hip line like so. Afterwards, I'll go ahead and cut out this front pattern. After cutting out the pattern, I'm going to be cutting out each of these patterns on my fabric on fold. While cutting on your fabric, ensure to add 1/2 inch round for joining. I was done cutting. Now I'm going to cut the sleeve. So I've gone ahead to fold my fabric into 2 and I've drawn a starting line. From that starting line, I'm going to mark 4 inches downwards on my biceps, and I'm going to mark the full length of this sleeve, which is 7 inches. Taking one of my patterns, I'm going to measure the armhole, and whatever it gave me there is what I'm going to mark on this biceps line. I'll connect from the starting line to the biceps line like so, and I'm going to find the midpoint of this slanted line. With my curved ruler, I'm going to connect from the starting line to that midpoint, and also from that midpoint, I'll connect it to the bicep line. So go ahead and do yours just like the way you see me doing. After connecting, I'll cut it out and retake the measurement to make sure it aligns with my armhole measurement. Okay, so when I took the measurement, it was more than, I had to reduce it to my actual armhole measurement. Then on the full length, I am going to mark off of my round sleeve and add extra 1.5 inch sewing allowance, then connected it to the bicep line, and that is it for the sleeve. I'm going to cut it out now, then use it to cut the second sleeve. I was done cutting. What I'm going to do now is to join my pieces together. So this is the center back and this is the side back. I'm going to be joining the fabric and the lining separate, front facing front, using the 1/2 inch allowance we added. Okay, I'll be doing the same for the center front and the side front. For this skirt part, I'm going to be joining the lining and the main fabric front facing front at the full length using 1/2 inch. I'm going to do this for the front and the back piece as well. After joining, this is how it's going to be. So the 3.5 inches we added, the 1/2 inches for joining the together, while the 3 inches is going to be part of the lining. So after joining it, I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. If you're following this method while cutting the lining for the skirt, you're going to minus 6 inches from the lining. Okay, so guys, I was done joining the upper part, and this is what the front piece looks like. What I'm going to do now is to open press the seams. I'm going to open press the seams of both the lining and the main fabric, and I will do the same for the back piece. I've also joined the lining of the skirt part to its main fabric the full length, and this is the front piece. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to top stitch at the front of the lining. I'm going to be top stitching on the lining at the right side, and after that I'm going to turn it this way and use 1/2 inch to join both sides. I'll do this for the front piece and the back piece. I'm going to be sewing the dart for this skirt back piece. Remember that we do not remove the dart for the back skirt, so I'm going to be marking that dart now. So from the center back, I'm going to mark 4.5 inch. I made a mistake here and marked 5 inches. So my dart is 3.5 and 1 inch for the zip allowance, making it 4.5 inches. So I've marked 4.5 inches, and I'm going to mark 6.5 inches downwards from the waist of the skirt, and I'm going to rule a straight line like so. Then at the top, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides. This is simply replicating the dart we marked on the pattern on this main fabric. So I'm going to be doing the same for the other back piece. I'll be doing it separately on the lining on the main fabric. So before you close the sides of the back skirt, make sure you put this dart. I've open pressed the seams of the upper part. What I'm going to do now is to join the shoulders of the front and back of the upper part. I will place the two shoulders of the front and back piece together, front facing front, and so on the wrong side using 1/2 inch. I'm going to be doing this separately for the main fabric and the lining. I was done joining the shoulders. What I'm going to do now is to cut the collar. To do that, I'm going to measure the round neck of the main fabric from one zip allowance to the other zip allowance. You're not going to include the 1 inch zip allowance, or you can also fold the neckline into two like this and take the measurement. I measured up to 3 times just to be sure of the accurate measurement. What I got was 28 inches. 28 inches divided by 4 is 14. I marked 14 inches as the length and the width is going to be 4.5 inches. Okay, I marked 5.5 inches. When I finished sewing it, I realized that it was too big, so I had to reduce the width of this collar. So make sure yours is 4.5 inches. After marking the length and the width, you're going to connect it in form of a rectangle. After connecting, at the top, I'm going to come outwards by 3.5 inches. At the point where I mark the 3.5 inches, I'm going to mark 1.5 inches upwards. I'm going to connect these 2 points to meet that 1.5 inches I marked. This side, I'm going to connect it with a slanted line, and for this upper part, I'm going to blend it into this straight line. I'll be adding 1/2 inch only on this slanted part for turning. After that, I'll go ahead and cut this out. I was done cutting out the collar pattern. Now I'm going to cut it on my fabric. So I'm going to fold my fabric into 2 in a triangle form like this. I was supposed to fold this fabric into 4, but the width of my fabric was not much, so I'm going to be joining this collar. So I folded it into 2 like this. I am going to cut it out, and I'm going to be adding 1/2 inch at the center front of this collar. After cutting this one out, I am going to fold my fabric into 2 again and cut another one exactly like this. That will be the lining. I was done cutting and I have 4 pieces here. I'll go back to my machine and join 2 pieces each. I was done joining and this is what it looks like. I also ironed my hairstay to it. So what I'm going to do now is to use 1/2 inch to join from this end all the way to the upper part and to the other end. Only the down parts will be left open because that's where I'm going to be attaching to the neckline of my dress. I was done joining and I've turned it to the right side. What I'm going to do now is to attach it to the neckline of my dress. To do that, I'll fold the neckline of my main fabric into 2 and notch the center front. I'll also notch the center front of the lining and that of the collar. My collar has joining already, so I know where the center front is. If yours does not have joining, notch the center front of your collar. I'm going to place the collar at the right side of the main fabric. Okay, so the collar is going to be in between the right side of the main fabric and the right side of the lining. As you can see, I'm pinning the collar to the right side of my main fabric on the neckline. So I'm going to pin it down to the zip allowance. Make sure you pin before you join, please. So after pinning it, I am going to bring the lining and I'm going to place it the place I notch. I'm going to place it at the center this way. This is the right side of the lining that I'm pinning, and I'm also going to pin it round. So I'll go back to my machine now and join the 3 of them together using 1/2 inch. I was done joining, so I trimmed the allowance so that it will not be too bulky inside. So this is what it looks like. You can see that it is in between the lining and the main fabric. And I've also joined the sides of the lining and the main fabric together. What I'm going to do now is to fold the collar like this and iron it. So you see the way I folded it. That is how you're also going to fold the center front. The center front is going to be equal. Then you're going to iron it. Now towards this pointy part, you're going to slant it like this. Okay, you can see what I'm doing. That is how you're going to do it. You're going to slant it this way so that the full collar will come out here. You're not going to fold it like how you folded the center front. It is going to be in a slanted manner. So I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. How you fold it is going to determine how it will come out. This is what it should look like when you are done ironing. I'm going to finish up this dress. To do that, I'll join the skirt part to the upper part of both the front and the back sides. I'll place them front facing front and join using 1/2 inch. I'm so sorry guys, I couldn't capture the finishing part of the making of this dress because my camera was not recording when I thought it was. Honestly, I felt bad about it, but I'm just gonna tell you guys what to do. So after joining the upper part and the skirt part, I'm going to close the sides. I'm going to join the sleeve, then close the sides using 1.5 inches. We added 2 inches while drafting, and we used 1/2 inch to turn with the lining, so you're left with 1.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 1.5 inches after joining the sleeve. Join the two sides of the front and back using 1.5 inches. I'm going to attach my zip and I'll close the zip allowance. Then my slit is going to be 8 inches upwards from the full length. And that'll be all for the cutting and sewing of this dress. You can see how beautiful this dress came out. I really love the outcome. If you find this video helpful and you've learned something, please hit on the subscribe button below. It's a way of encouraging me. And do not forget to turn on your notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Thanks for watching and see you guys in my next tutorial.